Hello and welcome to Entertainment of Excellence, the podcast where we talk about films, TV, all of it. Hi, I'm Ollie.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Ben.
And today we're talking about the 2015 film Anomalisa. This will contain spoilers.
Yeah, that's entertaining. Right, Anomalisa. This was a movie that we watched.
It's also a mouthful to say.
Anomalisa.
And Mona Lisa.
And Mona Lisa is... Am I describing the plot? Is that what's happening?
I think that's what
I
usually
think
happens.
that is what you usually do.
Okay, so David Thewlis is a very sad, felt man.
That's not a very nice thing to say about it.
Well, I think that he said he was quite sad. You know, at the end he was like, "Oh, I want to cry."
Could you say he felt quite sad?
So that's why you tune into Entertainment of Excellence whenever we release these.
Quality top joke.
That's quality top jokes. And he's gone to a hotel because he's going to do a speech about customer service. But everyone around him is kind of monotonous and he's really bored. And then
Lisa.
he tries to stop this monotony by calling up an old flame from 11 years ago. 10 years ago?
11.
Sorry, yeah, 11 years ago. And he thought, oh, maybe he'll reignite something. Instead, he just really annoys her and he's like, oops. So he drinks a bit more. And then he hears a unique voice that isn't Tom Noonan. So what we need to explain is that everyone in this movie, except David Thewlis, his character, is voiced by this guy called Tom Noonan, who is described as an offbeat character actor on his IMDb. So he's quite niche. I looked him up, didn't know any of his roles. Ollie's seen Synopsis in New York, so maybe you'd know him, but obviously we don't see him.
Yeah.
So when this voice happens, it's like, oh, he's like, oh my god, I'm literally in love, and she's the perfect match, and I don't know anything about her. So then they have sex for quite a long. Well, yeah, it's quite. There's a lot of
quite long. The actual sex, is probably quite short.
Well, foreplay is important, Ben.
That is true.
And there's some intense shots in that point.
Also, an important point to note is before this sex scene, you see David Thewlis' character Michael in the shower, and then you see him get out, and his great big felt penis is out, and then he scrambles to put some trousers on, and doesn't put any pants on.
Yeah, which means that he's really ready when the time comes.
When you're trying to cry and the tears won't come, it's like you're trying to come.
Okay.
So that's a reference you might not get if you've not seen the movie. We did
will contain spoilers.
Yeah, we did give a spoiler warning. So they do that, and then he gets woken up in the morning by a phone call. And he gets called down to the manager's office, which is in a really dingy room. And he's like, watch out for the sunken meeting room, which is my favourite line, which is just like a pit. And he gets him to get on a golf cart to drive over to his desk, where he's then like, oh, I heard you were having an affair. Why isn't it with me? I love you so much, Michael Stone. That's David Thewlis' character's name. It's like, oh, I love you so much, Michael Stone. Have an affair with me. And then he's like, oh, what the heck's going on? I need to drive away. And then he falls into the sunken meeting place. And then he gets out and he runs back through the office where everyone else is like, oh, have an affair with me, Michael Stone. And he's like, no. And then he's running away and his face falls off. But then he wakes up.
And it was all a dream.
It was all a dream. And Lisa's like, are you okay? And he's like, yes. And then they have breakfast. And Lisa speaks with food in her mouth. And then David Thewlis or Michael Stone is like, "Oh, actually, I don't love you anymore," and her voice starts.
Come on, she knocks a fork on a tooth as well.
Oh,
Oh, she does knock
yeah,
her
it's
fork
not just
on
the
her
speaking with food in the mouth.
Yeah.
And she's also very controlling.
Yeah.
So after like talking to this woman who is clearly infatuated with him because she's like read his book and sees him as a high celebrity figure and constantly talks about how much smarter he is than her. Afterwards, he then calls her controlling, and it's like, yikes! It's this much younger woman who he's got very drunk before doing the deed, and then he has to give his conference speech where he says he has a bit of a breakdown on stage because he has no one to talk to, and Lisa has morphed fully into one of the background monotonous people. And then Michael Stone goes home to his wife, gives his son the semen-filled toy. I can't be bothered to explain that.
I'm going in the AI highlights.
And then his wife's like, "Don't you see we love you?" And then Michael Stone goes like, "Nah, not really." And then I think it ends.
Don't leave, Michael. Where would I go?
Yeah.
What a line.
What a savage line. So I think that's the entire plot. I
Well,
think
and
I
then
did a
it
good
cuts
job.
back to Lisa at the very end.
That's true. It cuts back to Lisa and Emily, who has a real face now.
Ooh,
So
different perspective.
previously, all the background characters, I didn't notice this until Lisa's face morphed into it. But they all actually have the same face and just different clothes and hair. Like, you kind of see that all of the figures are separated into like two halves, split along the eyes. So it's like they've been replaced. Originally, they've all got a more plastic sheen as well, the background characters, rather than the felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the end, Emily is no longer one of the plasticky, boring people. She's got a real face. So it's like maybe Michael's just kind of like depressed. I think that might be the
You know that scene with him in the mirror where his face is like switching? Is that because also I hadn't picked up on the whole everyone having the same face at that point, but was his face like switching to that face and then back to his regular face?
I think that's what it was because I noticed it getting more shiny.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What's
Yeah.
that? Why is it more shiny?" So I think there's a lot
Fake
of it.
plastic glove.
Whoa. Because I think the thing with the bottom of his face falling off in the dream, I think, was a worry of him kind of merging into this background. Like, I think the movie is kind of a midlife crisis, but instead of, I don't know, it's instead of like an existentialist thing, it's just this longing for change, which is quite obvious throughout the movie. Because he literally, when he gets his old flame back of 10 years,
11.
sorry, 11 years, he says like, "Did anything change when we were together? Was there any change?" So I think that the whole point is that he just kind of feels locked in this dreary life, and he's trying to find change, and he thinks that by like having a fling with this young vulnerable woman, he's going to change his life. And it's like, "Oh, let's run away together." And then literally the next day he's like, "Oh, I'm bored."
Yeah, it's because when he was drunk to start with when he met them, and he then proceeded to meet them, have more drinks with them, and it was kind of, I think part of it's the fact he was drunk made him kind of see things differently, and he was very much picking up on the sort of unique quirks of Lisa, and all of the little things that he was just so used to everyone being the same. Everyone are talking about the weather, the zoos. You should try the chili.
You should try the chili. It's like it's got cinnamon in, and you put it on pasta.
And it's just the fact that she was inherently different made her attractive to him.
Yeah.
It's almost deranged the first time he meets her.
Yeah.
Because you just hear her voice, and then he goes, "Someone else," and then he dashes out of his room, and he's like, "Knock, knock, 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 knock. Who are you? Knock, 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 knock."
I think what's interesting about the presentation of him is that it's not sort of like he's this character who's feeling isolated and lonely because he's longing for things that other people have. It's almost a lot of this film is presented with him being in this relatively stable position where, you know, he has his family, and a lot of people actually admire him for his intelligence and his sort of proficiency in this field. And, you know, he's giving speech and stuff. It's not like he's in a desperate state, but it's just he's almost surrounded by all this monotony and stuff that it's this change that he's kind of projecting onto other people. And I think it was quite an interesting way of approaching that, where it's not like he's a total outcast or anything. It just shows sort of that well, I guess like a midlife crisis type thing.
Yeah, it's more that he has disdain for everyone else.
His life's become so monotonous that he's kind of lost all passion for anything he had, and for anyone he was close to.
It's almost like if he was jealous of someone, that would be better.
Yeah,
but he just hates everyone.
Yeah,
and thinks they're all beneath him. So,
and then that's the thing with the next morning, after he wakes up and you slowly see Lisa sort of turn into the same person again, because it's sort of, you know, he's waking up fresh the next morning, ripe and early. But he sees that a lot of the magic that he saw in her the last night isn't actually inherently good just because it's different. You know, a lot of there's lots of things about her that annoy him, and it's more the desire to have something different that matters to him, more than, you know, actually what is good for him.
Well, what I thought was interesting about that is because I was just thinking about this now, because we are doing this right after we watch the movie, as usual. We're not the people that watch the film 20 times, sorry. And I was thinking about it, when he goes to find Lisa... Yes, I said ripe and early, okay? And he hears Lisa's voice, right? And he goes, someone else. But when he gets to their room and finds them, she's just come out of the shower. So it can't have been her.
You're right, yeah.
On the corridor. So I think that he literally just, in his head, was like, I just need something. Yeah, it's like this fantasy that's like, there's definitely someone here that's someone else that I'm gonna have a fling with.
Yeah, it was like he was seeking something. It's almost like he projected that onto her just by chance almost, and then as she sort of fades into being everyone else and having that same voice and face, it's like that magic lost. And again, I think it's just interesting having, it's not him, as you say, it would almost be easier to sympathise with him more to an extent if he had some passion or desire to climb up the ladder, but it's almost like he's so cynical that he just views everyone else as inferior to him, and that's why he can't, it's easier for him to sort of use her as a way of fulfilling his own want for change. And just the fact that it's her, as you say, it's not really from her perspective, it's nothing special necessarily about her. It's just that he's looking for that, and then she happens to be the one he finds.
Yeah,
I don't think it's necessarily a symptom of becoming such a successful author and speaker, and it's not just because he's reached this point in his life where he's done everything and he then realizes he wants change, because it seems from the sounds of it that it's been a recurring pattern throughout his life. Like if you see the parallels with what's she called, Bella, the
who he met 10 years ago,
11.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
honestly, but she was talking to him and saying that she had a good thing going with him, and then excuse me, he sort of became distant and sort of tuned out of the whole thing, which makes me think it's like, oh, he kind of fell in love with her, and then the same things happened that it's happening with his current wife and happened with Lisa. It's like things became too comfortable for him, and he just wanted change for the sake of it.
Yeah, he's kind of in love with all these ideas, and I think it's that thing of, like, for his final speech, he's saying during the customer service thing, like, clearly just apathetically saying, like, you have to view the customer as a person just like you, who's had their own day. And he's like saying this to a face of everyone who he views as the same. So he clearly just doesn't believe other people are people, which is, it's like fairly, this is like one of my only criticisms, is that it is almost too on the nose, especially after in the dream where he's like, Lisa, you're the only other person. It's just me and you are people. Everyone else are not people, and that's because we're the only people. So you see, we're the only people, and everyone else isn't a person because Lisa, we're the only people. And it's like, yes, I get it.
Well, they could have done that, and I think that could have worked, being that on the nose, if at that point Lisa looked at him and was just like, do you realise how you're sounding? And it was a way to sort of show on the nose, but how he is just insane.
Although that wouldn't make sense because that wasn't his dream.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, because that didn't happen, the whole sort of being so on the nose does feel a bit like, it just feels a bit forced.
Yeah, I think a common theme in a lot of Kaufman stuff is obviously that self-indulgent aspect, and I don't feel like that was necessarily as prevalent as in this as some of his other stuff, but I think that it did have a very Kaufman protagonist, in the sense that a lot of the ideas presented through this character, I think, are very much a reflection of Kaufman's own views and his own sense. I mean, a lot of his films, I feel, are deeply pessimistic and do reflect his own sense of struggle of, I guess, kind of accepting this responsibility he has with creating his art, and sort of that disconnect that he feels, which I think was also shown through this character. But I don't think him presenting his protagonist as toxic and having the flaws is almost him like accepting his own toxic traits, but then like doing his best through this medium to solve them through providing other perspectives, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I was going to say this is almost one of his most optimistic things, because he presents how he normally views things but paints himself as the villain.
Exactly. So in a lot of the stuff, it's just really that the protagonist is lost in a world of other lost people, whereas I feel in this, the protagonist is lost, but it does have an optimistic lens through some of the other characters by providing their perspective, which I feel like is, again, it's not optimistic necessarily from Kaufman's perspective, because it's not saying that, you know, he's still flawed, but it's showing that, like, I think it's a better recognition of that flaw than just by going, oh, well, everything's kind of a mess and there's no resolution to this, because it's shown there is good outside of the perspective you're shown throughout most of the film.
Definitely, like, Lisa is almost, it is kind of Kaufman's ideal, where she does view everyone the same, and I think that's the point of, like, Michael being like, keep talking. It's not, like, he says it's the voice, but I think really it's just that she's like an actual person and she can describe all of these things that she enjoys and like the hardships he's been through, and it's almost this interesting thing where he is discovering this other person. Then kind of in the morning is like, well, she does also do all the other people stuff though, which is the same as everyone else, like eating.
But
like
he kind of puts his guard down for a little bit and sort of indulges himself in listening to her just be her.
Yeah.
And appreciate the fact that she is a unique individual with her own life, and you know, think of the customer as a person. They have all of these, you know, they have a family, they have a life, and all this thing. And it's like the next morning he's just back to the sort of burnt out sales rep, just not bothering to really, or maybe not even just not bothering, but just as a flaw in his own personality, just kind of ignoring the individuality of people. And it's like, you know, towards the end of the film, he has a surprise party thrown by his family, and it's like, they're all of the same face, all of the same voice. It's like, he clearly has a number of people who care about him to come to this party, and he has his wife and his kid, and he's just. It is that weird sort of paradox of, it is actually kind of optimistic by showing that his pessimism is kind of self-inflicted.
Yeah, that's why I think that the very ending scene with Lisa driving away and writing the note is, I think, what really made this film, because even those scenes where you show that people genuinely care for him, again, that is through his perspective, and it's through a very, I mean, I think it's really that the dream sequence that kind of instigates his loss of optimism in Lisa, because he starts to then see all these people that, again, are merging into one, and it's almost as if it's this deranged view that everyone is against him, and he's sort of taking that out on other people in his life. And so when he then returns home, you can't, even though you don't empathize with his character, you can't help but see that through his lens when he returns back, and everyone again is the same. But by providing that alternative through Lisa, where, as you say, it shows what was the other
Emily?
character? Yeah, it shows that she's different, and this isn't actually the case. I think just that very brief glimpse into a different perspective, like, shows that there is an alternative, and I think it shows a certain sense of maturity in Kaufman in kind of like showing that change for the character.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's interesting that at the start, so you definitely a lot more on Michael's side. You sympathise with him a lot, which I thought was interesting, because at the start you were all like, "Oh my god, these people are so annoying." Like the taxi driver, "Oh, are you British? Oh, I'm really good with accents." Or go to the zoo, and you're like, "Oh." And then he gets to the hotel, and they're doing the exact same thing. But then, like, when I was thinking back on that bit, I was like, I felt so sympathetic for this man, but he is like going to an extremely fancy hotel in a nice place to give a talk to loads of people, and it's like he's in a very privileged position. But and we were having the same thing as him, so it was interesting that they managed to do that. It's almost like Kaufman started off writing this movie to be on his own side, and then halfway through realized, like, oh, I think I'm the bad one here.
Yeah.
Which is why it opens with like, it kind of shows that through Bella's note, which is gradually revealed a bit, where at the start it's just extremely confrontive, and you're like, this feels undeserved. But then and then it reveals another bit, and then when it reveals the final bit and says, like, from Bella, which is after you've actually met her, it's like, yeah, he's very in the wrong here.
Yeah, because the whole film starts out with him, just getting off a plane, is obviously exhausted. All these people are sort of keep on trying to talk to him, but about nothing really, and he doesn't have the energy to deal with it. And I'm sure, most people have been in that situation, like, through their lives. They've had that, and you can sympathise with him a bit. But it's not just that he's tired and burnt out. You very clearly see that after he's relaxed a bit, and after he's had a couple of drinks and stuff, and then the next morning he's just exactly the same. And it's not that he doesn't have the energy to deal with it, it's just, energy or not, he just treats everyone as if they don't mean anything.
Yeah, it's like all the positives he sees in other people, like allowing Lisa to open up and stuff. It's not necessary for the good of her. It's like something that benefits him, because he's able to have this escape from home, and this he feels like by allowing her to do this, it's him sort of being charitable, and but really it's him just kind of using her, not just to to get sex, but also the idea of him, like, feeling like a better person because he's doing this.
Which is, I mean, this might be getting a bit too touchy, but is almost why that scene opens with him doing the act he does is possible, because it starts out with him giving a bit of head, what a gentleman. But that could also be, that's in a similar way of, like, he does the thing of, like, oh, I want to, that is also a similar,
He's kind of does like, it as an obligation to
Well, no, because at the start, because he's he's saying, "Oh, keep talking," and it's all this thing of like it's such a charitable thing to let her open up and to give head, but also it's like clearly fulfilling his needs. Like that whole scene is so interesting because it does go on quite a while, and it's quite uncomfortable to watch in a group, but it's like the whole scene is so interesting because when you're watching it, you're like, this does feel fairly normal and sweet, but then when you look back on it, like learning what you do about him, you're like, actually this was like very sneakily manipulative of him getting his own, like everything. He was being very reassuring, but he was like, oh, but it'll be okay.
Yeah, because she's like so taken aback that he's favoured her, but really it is sort of that vulnerability that he's, using, and it all very much feels like it's for his own means. And as you say, he always has to sort of be the one being controlling, but almost in a sense of it's more of a subtle control, because it's it's always him allowing her to open up rather than her opening it up and him accepting it, if you know what I mean. Like,
It was a very interesting scene, that, because I found the way it kind of towed the line between sort of like, consent as you would in a normal situation and kind of pushing the boundaries a bit, and kind of him just, obviously trying to, get her in his hotel room, get her to do this, get her relaxed and to open up and all of these things. And it's not like anything he does is explicitly sort of like rapey or like too like explicitly controlling, but there is always this undertone of he is kind of playing her the way that he wants things to pan out, and he's doing things to sort of relax her and make her suggest things, but it is very much him in control the whole time.
Yeah, which is actually like, that's kind of cool to do.
Yeah.
To show these, like, how things could be so subtly controlling, and maybe in the morning or a few days later it would be kind of like you feel a bit used and violated, because I think it does make it like the reason. Often if there's a scene like that in a movie, you'd actually be more like, that's a bit weird and distasteful, but like I felt like this was very clear in setting up that he clearly has the power over these two, with them both being like, oh my god, I read your book, and blah, blah, blah. And then like making Lisa go even further and be like, I didn't even really understand it, but I'm so enamored by you and you're so much like higher up, that I think it does such a good job of setting up that this is clearly a power imbalance.
Yeah, and you almost like see him start to realize that, because he's not able to establish that again when he meets up with the woman he was with 11 years ago. He lacks control in that. And again, it's very much from his perspective saying, oh, was there change and stuff. It's very much like seeking validation that he had in that, whatever that was in the past, and him trying to then fulfill this emptiness he's had since then. And he sees that he can't have it with her. So him then hearing that voice and having this spark is like him trying to find that in someone else. And I think that it's a good point you made, where you sort of see how it shifts throughout the film, where in the beginning you don't really know how to feel about him as a character, and it is like you are a bit more sympathetic towards him because of this strange situation, as it establishes the monotony of everyone else. You can't really help but latch onto him as the one different voice. But then when you're provided with this other distinct voice, you start to see that from a new perspective. And as she blends in with the others, it's not really, it's not like it's him that's good again because she's just become like everybody else. But again, it's solely focused on his perspective, and he sort of views her as used now in fulfilling his own desires. So it makes it even worse from his perspective.
Definitely. And I think we should move on to the voice work. Let's move on. I feel like talk so much about the story and just keeping an eye on time. The voice acting is so good. I was thinking about the scene where he gives the speech. Like David Thewlis really nails into it when he's giving this speech. There's a specific line where he says, "I have no one to talk to" 3 times, and it gets like more desperate each time. And when I say 3 times, it's like directly in a row that he says it 3 times, but it's like it gets more
3
impactful.
times, Chunky.
He goes like, "I have no one to talk to. I have no one to talk to. I have no one to talk to." But like, imagine that, but acting, and also 100 times more acting.
With even a tad of that bit of acting in there.
Yeah,
as
exactly, and some acting. But like that to me was absolutely devastating, and also like there's this beautiful bit about like wanting to cry but not being able to. I've literally written a song about that because I'm like, this is such a hard-hitting thing where he's like, I contort my face into the shapes that you familiarize with crying, but I just can't bring tears out. And that's like, I was like, that hits a bit too close.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really powerful. And it was kind of an important like last lament that he has before resuming his normal life where he should be happy, but he just isn't. Like this, he has every right to be. So I thought that David Thewlis's voice work there was really good.
I mean, slight tangent, but I think that whole speech was just him coming so close to realizing what's up with him, and then just missing it because of the way he keeps referencing back his speech about the customer service. And he's so close to realizing what's wrong with him, and you see him throughout the speech like just get further and further away.
Yeah,
and then
it's exactly like when Bella was talking to him, and she was like, "Why did you leave?" And he was like, "Mental problems." It's like, great, that's specific. It's like he is kind of on the right track, but
yeah, and I totally
misses.
get the criticism that people have in that speech where he's sort of having the breakdown where it's like, why should we care about him after sort of what we've been presented with previously? But you're right, it's him verging towards that recognition but never quite reaching it. And then when he returns home, and you know that line that with well, where else would I go, you know, it is an emotional scene, that, but I think if you read it almost as being a reflection of some of Kaufman's own insecurities about himself, it's not him. It's him sort of recognizing those, but not saying that. I don't really know how to put it, but like he hasn't. He accepts that they're there, but he hasn't found a way of solving them, and that's him through that speech. I think just showcasing that.
Yeah. It's almost like if he did cry, that would solve it. Like maybe that's also a metaphor, because it's interesting. Like he also the thing of I have no one to talk to then goes home to a wife.
Exactly.
Who's like, you understand that we love you, and it's like there's clearly someone right here that he almost gets close to, because like when he talks to the person that takes his bags and he's like, oh, was the flight bumpy? And he's like, no. But then when he calls his wife, he says the flight was bumpy. So he could say he's like clearly a bit closer with her than a random stranger, at least. So yeah, someone vaguely that he could talk to, but it's like he's just kind of neglecting her.
That scene was interesting. The way that he almost opened up to her, and then it's his son, right?
Yeah, his son.
His son comes down the stairs, and she kind of diverts her attention to focus on him a little bit, and then by not giving Michael the attention, it's kind of just like, oh, yeah, she's just another person.
Yeah, that could be it. Maybe he feels more distant after they had a child as possible. It's very depressing, but you know, so is this movie.
It's all right. I mean, if he does leave them, at least he's left a good inheritance gift for his for his son.
Oh God, I don't want to talk about the toy.
It had one nipple. Did you see it?
Yeah. Yes.
Well done.
Should keep a tally of how many nipples Tom saw.
I feel like I don't even remember the origin of this in joke.
It
Was it Robot Monster?
It was Robot
Monster.
Monster. I do understand the thing.
Which is why you, as the listener or viewer, if you're watching us on YouTube, should go watch our Robot Monster episode.
If you're a viewer on YouTube, you got to just see me pog. So
probably not a very good episode anymore by our standards. But it is a very movie.
Yes. So there's 2 more voice actors to talk about. So I think we could do that. I think Tom Noonan did such a good job of voicing people that are clearly displaying emotions but don't properly register.
Yeah.
Like, because that's obviously how Michael Stone is supposed to be interpreting this. Like, you see it on the TV with the movie. I can't remember. There was another thing of someone being upset, but it was kind of in this way that he feels that it's not genuine. So I think that Tom Noonan, because it's so hard, where it's almost like being told to do bad voice acting. But it's not bad voice acting. It's very intricate.
Really skilled voice acting to be able to do this. It's like the whole, like, every interaction kind of had a filter on it, and you could kind of see what you could kind of hear, like, pushing against that filter. You can see where it's meant to display emotions and stuff.
Yeah,
but it's very like tempered back.
And I think when it was first introduced, that idea of the all the same voices, some of the its usage in the first sort of 15-20 minutes was quite comedic, and I think that tone he nailed pretty well. And again, it was really down to that voice acting to emphasize that, because just like the idea of them all sounding the same is, there's a conflict between it being reflection of that monotony or whatever, but it is actually, the way they use it earlier on is quite funny, with like the music, and then some of the conversations in the taxi and when they arrive at the hotel. And a lot of that comedy stuff sort of drops out as it goes on further, but I do think that it was quite comedic at the start, which I think was handled quite well.
It was definitely quite funny at the start, while also displaying things like when he's on the hotel phone and there's like 5 different food symbols.
Yeah.
It's like, right.
If anything, the only thing about that was it was a bit jarring how it suddenly then shifted tonally.
Drop the comedy.
I don't think that necessarily makes the comedy at the start any worse. It's just that maybe it should have been kept up a bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it kind of wanted to show the drabness without being too drab. I thought it was okay to do that.
Because one of the first interaction in the film's the plane landing, and the guy next to him, like, keeping his hand on his in his hand.
It's like, you don't need to keep.
But, and then there was the only female voice actor,
Jennifer Jason Leigh,
who has been in some things.
I know her from Atypical mainly, where she plays the main character's mum. I've forgotten any of the characters' names in that show. There's the sister, there's the dad, there's the friend, the friend that plays the who's in an advert that was famous, but I've forgotten what the advert is. Where he's like, "Oh, that's mama, that's spicy," or something. That's the advert. I can't remember.
But she had some good voice acting.
She was really good, because she's actually like she's playing this presumably fairly young, although her last boyfriend was 8 years ago, so we don't know how, maybe not that young. But like, she plays this like very vulnerable, broken character. But like, if you kind of see Jennifer Jason Leigh and like her roles that she's been in, she actually usually plays quite strong, powerful characters. So I was surprised when I found out it was her when I looked at it, even though I was like, oh yeah, that's her voice. It's just that she did really well playing someone who did feel extremely lost and in need of, in need of help.
Yeah,
and a good relationship. R.I.P. I hope she finds one.
and the physical thing where she was always sort of hiding a face, and then didn't really want to get into it. I think that was quite an interesting way of showing like someone different. There was something to hide.
Yeah,
as opposed to everyone else just being uniform.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think the voice acting all around was really, really good. I think another thing to talk about is like just the way it looked. It was just amazing.
The animation was just beautiful.
It looks so nice. I swear sometimes the facial expressions were like better than actual facial expressions.
Yeah, like in the speech bit where there was like a close-up of him, and I just don't know how they managed to get so much expression and movement out of felt. It was amazing. It
was so cool. Because at first when I saw they were felt, I was like, this is going to feel a bit robotic. But obviously with the two main people who actually have faces, like they managed to get so much out of it. It looks so cool, and also all of the like rooms look beautiful.
The thing is, it is very restricted in its setting, with a lot of it being in the hotel and the hotel room, and just the fact that a lot of it was you know, a lot of the shots were very long, and they sort of like very, very slowly zoomed in, and you'd have this sort of background music that was building a bit, and I think that all just added to this feeling of unease and uncertainty, and just I don't know how he managed to capture these such interesting settings out of just very basic, you know, basic in terms of just the felt and also the setting of a hotel room. It didn't sound like you'd be able to get something so evocative out of it, but I think it really did have that feeling of confinement. I just think like fully captured the themes.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing was the camera movements. It's like obviously all of this was stop motion, but there was some shots and some zooms and some just really cool shots, the same way you would have with a traditional film.
I didn't even think about that. They're not filming these felt characters
I
move
know.
around, are they?
Yeah,
How'd they do that? Wait a minute, how did they do that, Ben? Wait, what? Wait, that's crazy.
You take a picture and you move it slightly and you take another picture.
But it looks so smooth. That's crazy.
That's the thing with really well done animation, is you kind of forget it's like a really intensive process.
Yeah. Like that scene where he's literally just running down the corridor.
Yeah,
I know.
How'd they do that?
Because a lot of stop motion stuff, even the best of it, kind of does embrace that being a bit clunky to a certain extent. Whereas this, just everything was so smooth.
Yeah.
Incredibly
crazy.
impressive to say that this is Kaufman's only endeavour into this type of filmmaking. I mean, obviously there was other people involved, but I think just to capture that emotion and have it still feel incredibly Kaufman-esque with something so detached from what he usually does, was very, very impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, credit to the animating team. I mean, I was kind of oddly surprised that there weren't more animators there. It was a list of maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 people.
Which is
max.
quite a lot of people, to be fair.
Yeah, but it's like, considering like, you know, 24 frames a second,
Yeah.
an hour and a half movie. I mean, that's no
wild.
easy feat. And the fact it was really flawless, you know, it's not like something like Aardman where the clunkiness is part of the charm. And, you know, it's probably not fully 24 frames a second. It's stuff like that. It's just good.
Good.
Very good.
Yeah, so just two quick fire things before we rate it. They revealed at the end of the movie that Anomalisa is a word in Japanese. What did you think of that?
That means goddess in heaven. Didn't really think about that, to be honest.
What do you think?
That's why I was asking you, because I was like, I haven't thought about it.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd heard a lot about this film prior without actually knowing too much about what it was about. Just that it was relatively divisive, and the name had always kind of confused me, as in I didn't really know what it was referring to. And then when it does explain this whole anomaly and Lisa thing, they click together. But then, yeah, the Japanese reveal, I don't really know what.
Maybe she's supposed to be kind of divine, flawless being. Don't know.
This is why you, as the listener, should write in and tell us what you think.
Yeah, do that. Put it in
do
the...
it.
Because actually there was quite a bit of, well, not a bit, but some stuff about language, because she sings in Italian, right, and goes on about other languages and Portuguese. So maybe there's something there about disconnect and
It's true.
you know, the idea of different voices. You know, how the different voices, like him being able to identify with something that he recognises as distinct, like a language.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them's good at Scrabble.
That is true.
So, theme.
And Scrabble is
carries
words. And
Scrabble is words.
that is a word.
And the other thing is, his mouth falls off and he's a robot.
Oh, yeah. Was he a robot or was it just... It was like a camera under it. I can't remember. That was really...
I was in his dream sequence, but also,
Yeah. It's kind of crazy.
yeah.
So we rate.
Yeah.
Well, just quickly before, how do you think this kind of compared with if you put it in the Kaufman catalogue? Because if anything, I feel like it was maybe I don't want to use the word hopeful, but I feel like the whole perspective shift kind of provided at least a cleaner and more definitive ending than something like, especially Synecdoche in New York, or even being John Malkovich, or I'm thinking of ending things where I feel like things are a bit more ambiguous, and I think that did work mostly in favour of this film. But I think where maybe lacked slightly, just compared to some of Kaufman's other stuff, it did feel maybe a bit less abstract and weird in some senses, which is something I actually really like about his other work, which I feel like was lost a bit. But it did kind of prove that he is able to tell these, I mean, conventional isn't the word, but these more
Accessible.
traditionally structured, and accessible films.
Which is really odd, because if this is one of the more accessible films he's done, why is it generally rated lower than something like Being John Malkovich?
Yeah, maybe it's that people go in wanting something specific, and because maybe if this came earlier in his career, before he'd kind of set what he was that he was going for, then it'd be more accepted. But people, I can see why it might be underwhelming in the sense that it's not as strange, and maybe people don't like how definitive it feels towards the end.
I think
even though it does leave questions.
I think the main problem is that, honestly, no, I don't think that it's people wanting it to be more strange. I think it's the most grounded Kaufman story, but it's got the strangest presentation with the animation and all of the same voices. And I think that also the pacing is quite slow. It's a very slow film. Like, time period is over a very short time. There's not many big events. It's a very kind of slice of life. So I think the casual moviegoer is going to go, why is there a 10-minute puppet sex scene? Like, that was kind of weird and boring, which I think is fair, but I did really like this. My only criticism would be that it is slightly bloated. It is a bit long. Although the problem is, again, it's one of the problems of it's supposed to show this monotony and kind of drabness.
Yeah. And I think there's sort of a split between something being slow and that being infuriating, and something not clicking together and that being infuriating. So if something like this is a bit of a slow burn, even though it's not a long film, but as you say, it's not like a huge amount necessarily happens, but because it all sort of, you can follow it more clearly, I feel like that's more rewarding than something being very slow and then not really feel like it builds to anything that conclusive. But also, I think as you say about the style being different, I mean, a lot of these shots were just objectively like appealing. Like, the one where it shows it from like the back of his perspective and you get that light through, I think that was one of the more creative ones in this. But a lot of it did just look nice, whereas a lot of his other earlier stuff, I think, is very much intentional, but it has like a very drab and dreary look about it, which I think something like I'm Thinking of Ending Things, maybe not so much because it has that Netflix budget, but it sort of has this feel to it, which I think I always associate with Kaufman, that this kind of lacked because it looked cleaner, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I wouldn't say I liked it as much as Being John Malkovich or Synecdoche in New York, but I think it's definitely an interesting one to see of how he's progressed and how he approached a different style and a slightly different subject matter.
What would you rate it?
I thought it was really good, really impacted me. I just thought it was a tad slow. I feel like I can't pinpoint exactly where, but I think you could probably trim some fat, bring it down for maybe an hour 10. And I also think it was slightly too on the nose. So I'm going to give it an 8, which is a very good score.
Round 8.
Yeah, very good score.
I would probably give it a 7.8. Because, yeah, it is an odd one, because I got the impression that I enjoyed it a bit more than you did. But also, and again, I don't think it was too bloated. I think the length was kind of just just right, but also the fact that it was very on the nose kind of just brings it down a little bit for me. And it's like Kaufman's other works, it's not a being John Malkovich. It's not a I'm thinking of ending things.
It's a very personal cry for help, is what I
Yeah.
thought this was.
I really enjoyed it, but I do also see why it's a more sort of controversial one. Like, some people love it, some people hate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it. The protagonist in this definitely captured a lot of what his other characters do in some of the other films we've discussed on the podcast before, actually. But I think this, probably alongside also his book Ant Kind, is maybe his most personal film, in that a lot of the stuff feels like it reflects his own insecurities and struggles. And I also don't feel like it was bloated. I think I was pretty much the same view as Ben. That the main issue really was that it, as a result of that, it did, come across as a bit on the nose. And but again, I did still enjoy it, so I'll go a 7.9 to even it out.
Wow. See, to me, this is like adaptation in how personal it is, but is less self-indulgent. Because adaptation is like adaptation. I was like, oh, because it was also slightly earlier in his career, so he was like, oh, but I need to be Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah.
I preferred this to adaptation.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's that split between personal and self-indulgent, and this. I don't think this felt very self-indulgent at all.
I don't think
it did. It's a much more mature view of like his own flaws, I'd say.
Yeah, it's almost like it was made after.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
my
almost
God.
like that.
Yeah.
Very excited to see what he does next, though, because
yeah,
all of his films, even if they don't always resonate with me as strongly as like his best work, they always provide something very creative and interesting. I don't think I've really seen another writer sort of have this very specific style that it feels very consistent, but at the same time, everything is very unique.
I think his IMDb picture perfectly encapsulates him. He's such a cheeky chap, but he looks slightly weird. He's got that cheeky, weird, sad look.
Can't beat it.
And that's Charlie Kaufman. He's also got the perfect name.
Yeah.
Kaufman. Come on. It's almost Kafka, but it's slightly more friendly.
Yeah. So moving on, we're actually starting to get submissions pouring in.
Oh my God!
Which means we've actually got one for you this week.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting one because I mean, we'll have to ask him. I don't know if it'll be publicly available anywhere, but let's be honest, we don't have many listeners now, do we? So you don't actually care. But so it was Will Fletcher sent in a screenplay.
Yeah, it was called Mastermind.
Yeah, which was it's quite coincidence actually, because there's also a board game called Mastermind.
Really, there's also a TV quiz show called Mastermind. Which are both referenced in this screenplay.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, did you read it?
I did read it.
Good. So, the story for this one is someone called Rowan, who's a big rowdy uni student that's like, oh, I'm cool and smart, gets invited to this slightly strange odd man called Eli's house, which is in a bit of disarray, and it turns out that he wants him to play the board game Mastermind with him to find out how good his skills of deduction are, in order to join a mysterious Nottingham investigation. I think it's Nottingham investigation. And yeah, so it's a very short thing. I'd imagine it'd be maybe 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes long. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd have probably said the 10-minute mark.
Yeah. And it's this kind of battle of wits. It has a lot of voiceovers, kind of Death Note style of Light and L. If you've seen Death Note, which I asked beforehand, and these two have both seen all of Death Note, so it was, luckily they got the reference.
Yeah.
Favourite show.
And you've also played Mastermind and understand what the board game is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a cool screenplay. It's very well formatted, and it's like one of my things that I thought was pretty wild is that throughout them playing a very just strategy, maths, probability based board game, you actually get a very good idea of these characters.
Yeah, I think that's what worked the best about it, because as someone who's not necessarily familiar with the game, some of the sort of intricacies of the gameplay and stuff did lose me to an extent, but I think that's not necessarily a fault of the screenplay. It's maybe more so that this would translate very well visually, especially with the voiceovers and stuff. And I do like the way you sort of learn with the protagonist of the strategy and things. But I think that its particular strength, which is revealed as it goes on, and particularly towards the end, is that idea of how their options and how they play reflect stuff about their own personalities and reactions to stuff, and how they can kind of make decisions about the going forward and stuff based on how they play. I think that was a very clever idea that was very well integrated into the story.
Yeah, it would be a very visual short film, I'd imagine, and there's a lot of sort of direction and thought that's gone into the screenplay as sort of how it would translate to the screen, and I think it was a good story, given that a lot of it is just based around this game, and I'll be upfront. I mean, I didn't know about the game beforehand. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I'd never, properly played it or studied the rules or anything. So, any criticisms I have of it, you take with like a huge pinch of salt, because I'm probably not the target audience for it. Which my criticisms at first read were kind of sped past the rules of the game, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if you are marketing it towards people who know the Mastermind game, it's good. I mean, it doesn't dwell too much on it. I mean, it does go through the rules, but I think that's more the fact that it's it's a 10-minute short film versus something like The Queen's Gambit or something as a proper like TV series where you can.
I also think that being able to see all the slots and pegs
exactly
is much easier. I did understand how the game worked vaguely beforehand. Realised I got some rules wrong when reading the script, so actually I think that the explainer was very good, because I thought initially that the pegs were placed like in Wordle, where if there's a black pin, you put it in the specific position that's correct. But actually, no. It's just that you know that one of the positions is correct. You don't know which one.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. But yeah, it was. I thought it was good at explaining the rules. Revealed some things. It had like a weird sense of unease, because there's Rowan the whole time was like being asked strange questions by Eli, and he's like, "What's the deal with that?" And the ending I thought was interesting, because I don't want to give the twist of the game away, but I'll tell you the ending where Rowan is in a huff, and then Eli's like, "I've actually done all the maths on this game." He said initially he hadn't, and he's like, "And I can tell you all the secrets if you stay." But Rowan still leaves, and I thought that was interesting. Of like showing the way that these characters have interacted, and it's like has that nuance of, is this out of he doesn't trust this guy anymore? Is this just ego, not wanting to understand his mistakes? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, I did really like that ending, and I suppose also the start, like the whole exposition and establishing of the setting and the characters, I think would work really well, especially that. The establishment of the setting and this confinement, it definitely added to the whole atmosphere.
And it's odd how a screenplay can create that atmosphere with no visual component whatsoever. I think that's a real credit to the writer in this.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only thing I felt about the ending was it felt perhaps slightly rushed, but again, I don't know if that is more so that if you made this into a short film, you'd linger more with the shots and then you'd have that ending where he leaves, whereas when you're sort of reading it quickly, it flies by a bit. So I think the thing about that, and then as you're saying with the actual gameplay, it is mostly that a lot of the stuff in this script is very visually dependent. So it would be really, really interesting to see as a short film. I think that's more so just a thought on my part of maybe not, going through it slowly like you would if you sort of thinking about translating it into it, reading it more like a book where you just sort of read it.
If you're just reading it, it seems more like, I mean, you've got the parallel sort of development of the characters' arcs and slowly revealing more about them and how they react to things. But just reading it, it seems like a sequence of moves, which is kind of odd as a reviewer because that isn't a bad thing. That's just the fact it is just a script and doesn't have its visual component.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a slower reader, I think, definitely than Ollie. I know that. I've not really watched Ben read. I don't know why I know Ollie's a faster
reader as well.
See, I'm quite a slow reader, and I think this is partially just. I think this is just the way I read. Is that I'm quite like on the moment, which is why I find reading really tiring, and which meant that I felt that those moments came across well. So it's actually a skill issue.
Well, you're just better than us.
Yeah, basically. It basically means that I take like 2 years to read something that you take 2 weeks. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm basically better in every way.
Cool. Any constructive criticism?
I thought it's possibly just like some dialogue was maybe too explainy of specific maths probability things, but like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't actually know how I'd improve that. It's probably like, I don't know, it's just the things they said. It was like 1 or 2 specific voiceovers, I think, where it was explaining what they've learned with the information of their guesses. I think was slightly a bit too like, aha, because of this, I know this. I think there must be a way to do it in a more interesting way.
Yeah.
But I'd have to have it in front of me. But like, I think that what the information is being presented does have to stay there. It just needs to be slightly tweaked.
Yeah, and again, it's just that you're having to get so much kind of information across, and a lot of it is very important to learn things about the characters. So it's difficult to think of something that an alternative way of just kind of explaining what this move means, because especially for someone who isn't familiar with the game, you wouldn't really understand the impact of that and how that relates to things that come later if you didn't have it explained to you, like spelt out the way it is in the voiceover and stuff. So it's one of those where I couldn't really think of a way it could have been done better. But in terms of just the formatting of everything, and because we've never really had a script submission before, I think it was incredibly professionally done for
Is it his
like
first
first
finished
time
screenplay?
I think so. You can tell. I mean, I do know that he has read a few screenplays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can definitely see that.
So yeah, it's good that it's translated. So good submission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe we'll see it at some point
Ooh.
as a movie.
we'll do that as a submission if someone submits it. That is.
Yeah,
If no one submits it, we're not doing it.
exactly.
Which is why if you have something you'd like submitting, some form of media that doesn't involve a 20-minute puppet sex scene.
It keeps increasing every time.
Was it not 20 minutes?
It was not 20 minutes long.
Felt like it.
So as long as it doesn't have a 40 minutes puppet sex,
Then
then we'll review it. Contact us at the contact form at EOV Podcast website, which is entertainmentofexcellence.weebly.com. We are also on Instagram and TikTok, both at EOV Podcast, and we will post there every so often whenever we can be bothered to make content.
yeah, exactly.
Do you want to do rapid fire recommendations? You can talk about Fringe if you want.
The Edinburgh Fringe is good, and you
Right,
should
next.
go. I watched Michelle Brazier Reform, That was a really good show. What else did I see? I'm going to rapid fire shows I saw.
Don't ask me.
What?
I don't know.
What? Okay, Potty the Plant, which was marketed to me as a dark comedy musical, and I was like, oh god. But actually it's really good, and when we saw it on the second to last night, there was already like a cult fan base formed that was singing along to every song and doing every dance move. So that could end up somewhere in a kind of Star Kid vibe if anyone else is into niche comedy musicals that are on the internet. It's kind of similar to Star Kid, so look out for Potty the Plant. There was Bojangles, Dracula in Space. That is a string quartet who dance and sing and do comedy, and that was like a musical about them trying to get corporate gigs, but instead they get kidnapped by Dracula, and it's also about feminism. That was also really good. There was a cabaret we saw called Shiitake Nights, which was absolutely bizarre and absurd and one of our favourite ever things. It was so funny, and I cannot describe it because it's impossible to describe with words. So if you're ever in Glasgow, I think, watch Shiitake Nights. From Shiitake Nights, we saw Darius Amadi, who technically does clowning, but it's not like the red nose and stuff. It's the type of comedy, and that was really, really, really funny. We absolutely loved him. And he's in Paris, I think, but he's American, and he used to live in Norway. Whatever. Darius Amadi was really good. Who else did I watch? Blood on the Clocktail Live was good. Alex, someone... The show was called I Must Reach the Summit, Please God, I Must Reach the Summit. And they were funny. Look up that show and the person will come up. What else did I watch? Locomotive for Murder by Pinch Punch Improv. That was good. The improv musical was good. And I think that's all I could... Oh, I watched Leighton Live, so there were some good comedians there. That's all I can remember, which means that if I watched anything else, it wasn't as good. So there you go. That's my recommendations.
Nice. Do you have that many, Ben?
Well, almost. I have none. Because
Okay.
I've been very busy the last few weeks.
Did you watch Good Omens season 2?
Oh yeah, go on. I can recommend that. I've seen all but the last episode. So unless it completely messes up in the last episode, it's still more episodes than we saw of Dirk Gently before reviewing a whole episode of it. It's good. If you've seen Good Omens season 1, you'll love it. If you haven't seen Good Omens season 1, you should go and watch it. It's
Before watching season 2, do you think?
preferably, yeah. Although they kind of are. It's not so much the plot continues. It's more sort of a different tangential plot. It does make sense for you to watch the first season first, obviously, but yeah, it's a little bit jarring at first because you kind of get the impression at the end of season 1 that there's going to be a certain way season 2 will go, and it doesn't do that. But what it does is fun and great, and David Tennant and why am I forgetting his name? Michael Sheen. Bloody Michael Sheen. They are great together, and they make a great couple together, whether people want to admit it or not.
I also just want to quickly say about Good Omens season 2. I found out recently, because I knew that there was a draft made for Good Omens 2, the book. It turns out that season 2 is not based on the draft. Season 3, I think, will be based on the draft, and season 2 is bridging the gap because there's a time jump between the
that
two,
makes sense.
or what the second book would be. So season 2 is bridging that time jump.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice. Just one quick recommendation for me. I watched 2001 for like the 5th time with a commentary from the actor of Dave Bowman and Frank Paul, right?
Frank, that's it. I was talking about this with one of my friends. I was like, I can't remember what the other guy's name is that Dave's with.
But it was really interesting. I think the slight issue is I was listening to it on just like the podcast app on my phone, and my DVD copy was like 8 minutes shorter, so I had to keep on just pausing it to sync it back up, which is a bit infuriating.
How did that happen?
Because it must have been like a very slightly extended one on the. I think it was from a Blu-ray reissue. But I could hear the audio as well as the commentary. So it was a bit annoying, but it wasn't the end of the world. And it did have some very interesting insight about the behind the scenes stuff. I think probably the most interesting one was how the actor Frank Paul, I can't remember their names, but he was saying how there was one day where he was kind of annoyed on the set, feeling like stuff wasn't really going as smoothly as it should have been going, and he basically Kubrick could like feel something was up, so he went and asked him, and he said it to him. So Kubrick like shut down all the production for that day, and then he called him into his office. So he was saying, "Oh God, I'm going to get fired." I'm not as sure how much they'd done or how far into production they were, and he was sort of a bit, laid back with him, just sort of asking what his issue was. And then it was actually him who ended up suggesting about the scene just before the intermission where they go into the pod and then Hal rotates it and then mute it so he can't hear, and then the lip reading. All that came from him. And actually the towards the end with the switching perspectives between the Bowman characters and the smashing of the glass, and then they look at the bed, all of that was done by the actor of Bowman. So it was just interesting knowing a bit about the collaboration between Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. I didn't sort of realise how much of it was actually influenced by the actors and other people.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting, and I think if you want to know some more about 2001, that's probably worth doing. If you can find a slightly better way of doing it than I did.
Yeah.
So that was good.
I'm surprised Kubrick treated his actors so well. He doesn't normally do that.
Well, they did keep. I mean, they wouldn't really go on the commentary and say that he was an awful human being, but they were saying like he was good to work with. If anything, he was a bit. I mean, obviously he was very much a perfectionist, but he was a bit more reserved, and there's all these stories about him being such an expert on doing all the research around the films he made, where he would often have meals and stuff with specialists in the field and be talking at a level like equal to them about this thing. So it really just showed like how much of a master he was at his craft, and how much work went into all the films that you don't necessarily think about. I wouldn't say it was quite as good as Andrew Staten's commentary on the Big Boss, but a close second.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we could get Andrew's sort of experiences working on the set of 2001.
Yeah.
But he's just busy with World War Z, right?
Yeah. He's World War Z.
Maybe a World War Z commentary with Andrew would be.
Oh,
I wish.
That'd be good. Well,
So yeah. Thanks for watching.
Is that the end of the episode?
Should we do the catchphrase?
We should say our favourite catchphrase, which is Anomalisa means anonymous Lisa. All right, see ya.
Presented by Ollie Luff, Tom Sweeney, and Ben Stinson. Music by Tom Sweeney and Ben Stinson. Audio engineered by Ben Stinson at Longwater Productions. All Rights See Ya, created by Al Wright, Sr. All rights, brackets, see ya, close brackets, reserved.